The June sun blazed mercilessly over the outdoor graduation ceremony at Roosevelt High School in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. Sweat beaded on Robert Bob Thompson's forehead as he adjusted his tie for the third time, the polyester fabric clinging uncomfortably to his neck. At 62, he'd attended enough of these ceremonies to know the drill, but today felt different. Today, his stepdaughter Emma was walking across that stage. Bob's weathered hands gripped the program tighter as he scanned the sea of red caps and gowns. 20 years of packed lunches, homework help, soccer practices, and teenage drama. 20 years of being the man who showed up when Emma's biological father had walked away when she was just 3 years old. "There she is," whispered Linda, his wife of 18 years, pointing toward the third row of graduates. Her voice carried that maternal pride that had always made Bob's chest swell with second-hand joy. Linda's graying auburn hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and she wore the navy dress they'd bought specifically for this occasion. Emma sat poised and confident, her long blonde hair cascading over her graduation gown. Even from a distance, Bob could see she'd inherited Linda's determined jawline and bright blue eyes. She'd grown into a remarkable young woman. Valedictorian, full scholarship to Northwestern University, captain of the debate team. The Arizona heat shimmered off the asphalt parking lot beyond the ceremony seating, creating wavy mirages that reminded Bob of all the times he'd driven Emma to various activities over the years. His old Ford pickup had logged thousands of miles shuttling her between school, friends' houses, and extracurriculars. As Principal Martinez began calling names alphabetically, Bob's mind wandered to Emma's childhood. He remembered teaching her to ride a bike in their driveway, the concrete still radiating heat even at dusk during those Phoenix summers. He'd run alongside her for what felt like hours, his hand steadying the seat until that magical moment when she'd found her balance. "Robert Thompson," he'd whispered that day when she'd asked what to call him. "But Bob works just fine, sweetheart." The memory dissolved as applause erupted around him. Several names had passed, and they were getting closer to the T's. "Emma Jane Thompson," Principal Martinez announced, his voice echoing through the portable sound system. Bob shot to his feet, clapping so hard his palms stung. Linda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her smile radiant despite the tears. Emma walked across the stage with grace, her posture perfect, something Linda had drilled into her during those awkward middle school years. As Emma shook hands with the principal and accepted her diploma, she turned toward the audience. For a moment, Bob thought their eyes met across the crowd. He waved enthusiastically, his heart swelling with paternal pride. After the ceremony, families clustered on the school lawn, creating pockets of celebration amid the chaos of folding chairs and graduates seeking their loved ones. Bob spotted Emma near the main building, surrounded by friends and their families. He and Linda made their way through the crowd, Bob carrying the bouquet of sunflowers they'd bought, Emma's favorite since childhood. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Linda said, embracing Emma tightly. "We're so proud of you." Bob stepped forward, arms outstretched. "Emma, you did it. We knew you would, but seeing it happen—" His voice caught slightly. Emma hugged him briefly, but Bob noticed the embrace felt perfunctory, lacking the warmth of their usual interactions. She seemed distracted, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Thanks, Bob," she said, accepting the sunflowers with a polite smile. "These are beautiful." Bob. Not Dad, not even the occasional pops she'd used during her early teens. Just Bob. "Your father would be so proud," Linda said, seemingly oblivious to the subtle shift in Emma's demeanor. Emma's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Actually, Mom, I need to tell you both something." She glanced around nervously, then led them slightly away from the crowd, toward a quieter area near the school's entrance. Bob felt his stomach clench. In 2 decades of parenting, he'd learned to recognize that particular tone, the one that preceded difficult conversations. "What is it, honey?" Linda asked, concern creeping into her voice. Emma took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting with the diploma in her hands. "I've been in contact with my biological father." The words hit Bob like a physical blow. Linda's face went pale, and her hand instinctively reached for Bob's arm. "What do you mean, in contact?" Linda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He reached out through social media about 6 months ago," Emma continued, her words coming faster now, as if she'd rehearsed them. "We've been talking, getting to know each other. He wants to be part of my life again." Bob found his voice, though it sounded strange to his own ears. "Emma, you know he left. You were just a baby when he—" "I know the story, Bob," Emma interrupted, and there was an edge to her voice he'd never heard before. "But people change. He's explained everything to me. He was young, scared, not ready for the responsibility, but he's different now." The Arizona sun seemed to grow hotter, and Bob could feel sweat beginning to soak through his dress shirt. Around them, other families continued their celebrations, oblivious to the earthquake happening in the Thompson family. "Sweetheart," Linda said carefully, "I understand you're curious about him, but you need to remember everything Bob has done for you. He's been your father in every way that matters." Emma's jaw tightened, that stubborn expression Bob had seen countless times during her teenage years. "He's been great, Mom, really, but he's not my real dad." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire, acrid and suffocating. Bob felt as though someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart until it stopped beating. "Not your real dad?" Bob repeated slowly, his voice hoarse. Emma's face flushed, but she didn't back down. "You know what I mean, Bob. Biologically speaking, DNA doesn't lie." Linda stepped between them, her maternal instincts kicking in. "Emma Jane Thompson, you apologize right now. Bob has been more of a father to you than—" "It's okay, Linda," Bob said quietly, though everything inside him screamed that it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. Emma looked between her parents, and for a moment, Bob saw a flicker of the little girl who used to crawl into his lap during thunderstorms. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the determined young woman who just declared him irrelevant to her identity. "I'm sorry if that hurt your feelings, Bob," Emma said, her tone suggesting she wasn't particularly sorry at all. "But I'm 18 now. I'm an adult, and I have the right to know my real father." Bob nodded slowly, his mind reeling. 20 years of father-daughter dances, bedtime stories, homework sessions, and heart-to-heart talks had just been dismissed with clinical precision. He was Bob now, not Dad, a nice man who'd happened to be married to her mother, nothing more. "Of course you do," he managed to say, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. "You're absolutely right." Linda stared at him in shock, clearly expecting him to fight harder, but Bob had learned long ago that love sometimes meant letting go, even when it felt like dying. As they walked back to the car in relative silence, Bob's mind was already working. Emma was right about one thing. She was an adult now, old enough to make her own choices, even if those choices cut him to the bone. Old enough to face the consequences of those choices too. 3 weeks after graduation, the Thompson house on Elm Street felt different. The celebration banners had been taken down, Emma's graduation photos sat in frames throughout the living room, and life had settled into an uneasy routine. Emma spent most of her time either working her summer job at the local bookstore or meeting with her newfound biological father, Marcus Wheeler. Bob sat in his home office on a sweltering July evening, the air conditioning humming steadily as he stared at documents spread across his oak desk. Legal papers, financial statements, and a leather-bound folder marked Last Will and Testament lay before him like pieces of a puzzle he was reluctantly assembling. Through the thin walls, he could hear Emma on the phone in her bedroom, her voice animated in a way it hadn't been around the house for weeks. The muffled conversation drifted down the hallway, punctuated by laughter that used to be reserved for family dinners and shared jokes. "I know, it's crazy how much we have in common," Emma was saying. "You're right, genetics really are fascinating." Bob closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. The headaches had started the week after graduation and hadn't let up since. Dr. Peterson had attributed them to stress and prescribed rest. But rest felt impossible when his own home had become a constant reminder of his apparent insignificance. Linda appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. Her face showed the strain of the past few weeks. New lines around her eyes, a tightness to her smile that hadn't been there before. "You missed dinner again," she said softly, setting 1 glass on his desk and settling into the chair across from him. "Wasn't hungry," Bob replied, though his stomach had been growling for the past hour. Food had lost much of its appeal lately. Linda's gaze fell on the legal documents. "Bob, what are all these papers?" He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. At 62, Bob had the solid build of a man who'd spent 30 years in construction before starting his own contracting business. His hands bore the scars and calluses of hard work, and his face carried the weathered lines of someone who'd spent countless hours under the Arizona sun. "Just getting my affairs in order," he said carefully. "Your affairs?" Linda's voice rose slightly. "Bob, you're scaring me." "Are you sick? Is this about the headaches?" Bob met her eyes, those same blue eyes Emma had inherited. "I'm fine, Linda. Just being practical." Before Linda could respond, Emma's voice carried clearly from her room. "I can't wait for you to meet Mom and Bob at dinner this weekend. Well, Bob's my stepdad, but you know what I mean." The casual dismissal hit Bob like a slap. Stepdad. As if 20 years could be reduced to a technicality. Linda's face hardened. "I can't believe she's doing this to you, to us." Bob picked up his reading glasses and returned his attention to the documents. "She's not doing anything to us, Linda. She's living her life." "By breaking your heart?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Bob had always prided himself on being a practical man, someone who dealt with facts rather than emotions, but the facts were becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "Hearts heal," he said finally. "What matters is that Emma's happy." Linda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "What matters is that she's being ungrateful and cruel. You've given her everything, Bob, everything." After Linda left, Bob returned to his papers. The will revision was straightforward enough. His attorney, David Chen, had explained the process clearly. As a successful contractor who'd built Thompson Construction from nothing into a thriving business, Bob had accumulated considerable assets over the years. The house was worth nearly $400,000 in the current market. The business was valued at close to $2 million, and his retirement accounts were substantial. Originally, everything had been set to pass to Linda, with Emma as the secondary beneficiary. It was a standard arrangement for a blended family, ensuring Linda's security while guaranteeing Emma's future. But circumstances had changed. Bob's phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus Wheeler had tagged Emma in a Facebook post about their dinner the night before, complete with photos of them laughing over steaks at Papado's Seafood Kitchen. The caption read, "Finally getting to know my brilliant daughter. So proud of the woman she's become." Bob stared at the photo for a long moment. Marcus looked younger than his own 43 years, with carefully styled hair and designer clothes that suggested financial success. He had Emma's nose and the same confident smile she'd worn when accepting her diploma. Another text notification popped up, this one from Emma herself. "Staying at Marcus's apartment tonight. He's helping me look at northwestern housing options online. Don't wait up." Bob set the phone aside and picked up his pen. David Chen had emphasized that will revisions should be made carefully, with full consideration of their implications. But some decisions, Bob reflected, made themselves. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Bob was reviewing blueprints for a commercial renovation project when the doorbell rang. Through the living room window, he could see a silver BMW in his driveway, Marcus Wheeler's car, based on the photos Emma had shown them. Linda answered the door, and Bob could hear the tension in her voice, even from his office. "I'm sorry. Who did you say you were?" "Marcus Wheeler, Emma's father. I was hoping to speak with you and Bob." Bob emerged from his office to find Marcus standing in their entryway, looking perfectly at ease despite the obvious awkwardness of the situation. He was taller than Bob had expected, probably 6'2", with the kind of polished appearance that came from regular gym visits and expensive grooming. "Mr. Wheeler," Bob said, extending his hand. "I'm Bob Thompson." Marcus's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Please, call me Marcus. I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. I wanted to talk to you both about Emma." Linda remained standing near the door, her arms crossed defensively. "Emma's at work." "I know. That's actually why I came now." Marcus glanced around the living room, taking in the family photos that chronicled Emma's life from toddler to graduate. "I wanted to thank you both for everything you've done for my daughter." Bob felt his jaw tighten at the possessive phrase, but he kept his voice level. "Emma's a remarkable young woman." "She is," Marcus agreed. "And I realize I have a lot of lost time to make up for. I was hoping we could discuss how to make this transition easier for everyone." Linda finally spoke, her voice sharp. "Transition to what exactly?" Marcus's composure didn't waver. "To Emma and me building a real relationship. I know this is difficult, but she's an adult now, and she has the right to know her biological father." "Where were you when she had chickenpox at 5 years old?" Linda asked, her voice rising. "Where were you when she broke her arm falling off her bike? Where were you during the teenage years, the boy problems, the college applications?" Bob placed a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. "Linda," Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I know I can't make up for those years. I was young and stupid when I left, but I'm here now, and I want to be part of Emma's future." "What kind of future?" Bob asked quietly. "Well, I've been thinking about that." Marcus's confidence returned. "I know Emma received a scholarship to Northwestern, but I'd like to cover her expenses anyway. Tuition, room and board, spending money. And I was thinking about setting up a trust fund for her future. Maybe help her buy a house when she graduates, start her own family." The implication was clear. Marcus Wheeler had money, influence, and the biological claim that Bob would never possess. He was offering Emma things that Bob, for all his love and devotion, couldn't match. "That's very generous," Bob said evenly. "I'm also hoping she might consider changing her last name," Marcus continued. "Wheeler's her birth name, after all. I understand she's been a Thompson for most of her life, but now that we're reconnecting—" Linda made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Bob felt something cold and final settle in his chest. "I think," Bob said carefully, "that should be Emma's decision to make." Marcus smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "Of course. I just wanted you both to know my intentions. Emma means everything to me." After Marcus left, Bob and Linda sat in their living room in stunned silence. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny reminders of impermanence. "He's trying to buy her," Linda whispered finally. Bob picked up one of Emma's graduation photos from the coffee table. A candid shot of her laughing at something he'd said during the post-ceremony celebration. She looked radiant, young, full of promise. Maybe, he said. Or maybe he genuinely wants to be her father. You are her father. Bob set the photo down gently. According to Emma, I'm not. That evening, as he returned to his legal documents, Bob's phone rang. David Chen's name appeared on the screen. Bob, I've reviewed the revisions you requested, his attorney said without preamble. Are you sure about this? These are significant changes. Bob looked out his office window at the backyard where he'd built Emma a swing set when she was 7. The swings hung motionless in the still air, empty and forgotten. I'm sure, David. How soon can we make it official? I can have the documents ready by Friday. But Bob, I strongly recommend you discuss this with your family first. These kinds of changes can have lasting consequences. The consequences, Bob said quietly, started 3 weeks ago. After hanging up, Bob sat in the gathering darkness of his office, listening to the sounds of his house. Linda was watching television in the living room, the familiar voices of her evening news anchors providing a comforting background hum. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's dog barked intermittently. Emma still wasn't home. August in Phoenix was brutal, with temperatures soaring past 115 degrees and the asphalt soft enough to leave footprints. Bob stood in the driveway of a half-completed strip mall, reviewing progress with his foreman, Miguel Santos, when his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Can we talk tonight? Something important. Bob wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, his hard hat providing little relief from the relentless sun. Around them, construction workers moved with the practiced efficiency of men accustomed to working in extreme heat, their movements measured and deliberate. Everything looks good, Miguel, Bob said, pocketing his phone. Make sure the crew takes water breaks every 30 minutes. This heat will kill someone if we're not careful. Miguel nodded, his weathered face serious. At 55, he'd been with Thompson Construction for 12 years and had become more than an employee. He was Bob's closest friend and confidant. Boss, you okay? You seem distracted lately. Bob had confided in Miguel about the situation with Emma, finding it easier to talk to someone outside the family drama. Miguel had raised 4 children of his own and understood the complexities of blended families. Emma wants to talk tonight, Bob said. Probably more news about her biological father. Miguel shook his head. That girl doesn't know what she has. You've been a good father, Bob, better than most blood fathers I know. The drive home took Bob through familiar neighborhoods, past the elementary school where he'd attended countless events, the park where Emma had played soccer for 6 years, and the ice cream shop where they'd celebrated every report card. Each landmark felt like a monument to a relationship that apparently meant less than he'd believed. At home, Linda was preparing dinner with unusual intensity, her movements sharp and aggressive as she chopped vegetables for a salad. She's been upstairs for an hour getting ready, Linda said, without looking up from her cutting board. Whatever she wants to discuss, she's treating it like a presentation. Bob loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of water from the refrigerator. The house felt cooler than usual. Linda always ran the air conditioning extra cold when she was stressed. Maybe it's good news, he said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Good news for who? Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway before Bob could answer. She wore a sundress he didn't recognize, something more sophisticated than her usual style, and had clearly spent time on her hair and makeup. She looked nervous, but determined. Hi, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Can we sit down, all of us? They gathered in the living room, Bob and Linda on the couch, Emma in the armchair across from them. The coffee table between them felt like a negotiating table, formal and imposing. Emma took a deep breath. I've made some decisions about my future, and I wanted you both to hear them from me. Bob felt his stomach clench. In his experience, Conversations that began with prepared statements rarely ended well. "First," Emma continued, "I've decided to change my last name back to Wheeler before I start college. Marcus helped me understand that it's important to embrace my real identity." Linda's face went pale. "Your real identity? Emma, you've been a Thompson for 15 years. "Because you remarried," Emma said, her tone suggesting this was a simple fact rather than a relationship. "But I'm not actually a Thompson. I never was." Bob felt each word like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. "Is that what you wanted to discuss?" "Partly." Emma shifted in her chair, her confidence wavering slightly. "Marcus has also offered to pay for my entire college education, plus living expenses and a car. He wants to set up a trust fund for my future." "We've already discussed college finances," Linda said sharply. "Bob and I have been saving for your education since you were 10 years old. Emma's jaw tightened. "I know, and I'm grateful. But Marcus can provide opportunities you can't. He has connections at Northwestern, internship possibilities, career contacts. He's offering me a real future." The implication hung in the air. Bob and Linda could only offer her a fake future, a consolation prize compared to what her biological father could provide. Bob found his voice. "And you've decided to accept his offer?" "Yes." Emma met his eyes directly for the first time in weeks. "I know this might hurt your feelings, Bob, but this is what's best for me." Linda stood abruptly. "What's best for you? Emma, do you have any idea what Bob has sacrificed for you over the years? The overtime he worked to pay for your dance lessons, the vacations we didn't take so we could save for your college, the—" "Linda," Bob said quietly, "it's okay." "It's not okay." Linda's voice broke slightly. "She's being selfish and ungrateful, and I won't sit here and watch her throw away 20 years of love for some stranger with a checkbook." Emma's face flushed. "He's not a stranger, Mom. He's my father, my real father." The words hit the room like a bomb. Bob felt something fundamental shift inside him, a door closing that would never open again. "You're absolutely right," Bob said, his voice eerily calm. "Marcus is your biological father, and you're an adult who can make her own choices." Emma looked surprised by his reasonable tone. "Thank you for understanding." "I do understand," Bob continued. "I understand that you've decided biology is more important than the person who raised you. I understand that financial opportunity outweighs 2 decades of daily love and commitment. And I understand that you've chosen to see me as a temporary substitute rather than your real father." Emma's confidence began to crack. "Bob, that's not— I mean, you know I care about you." "Care about me?" Bob repeated. "The way you'd care about a neighbor who helped you out, a family friend who was kind to you." "That's not fair," Emma protested. Bob stood, his full height making him seem larger in the suddenly small room. "What's not fair, Emma, is pretending that what we had meant something to you when your actions prove otherwise." Linda was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Emma looked between her parents, seeming to realize for the first time that her decisions had consequences beyond her own life. "I think," Bob said carefully, "that if you're going to embrace your real identity as a Wheeler, you should embrace all of it. Marcus can provide for your education, your future, your trust fund. He can be the father you apparently always wanted." "Bob, wait," Emma said, panic creeping into her voice. "I didn't say I didn't want you in my life." "But you did say that, Emma. Maybe not in those exact words, but the message was clear." Bob moved toward the stairs. "I'm going to make some phone calls. Congratulations on finding your real father." Later that evening, Bob sat in his office with David Chen on speakerphone, finalizing the changes to his will. Linda had gone to bed early with a headache, and Emma had left the house shortly after their conversation, presumably to seek comfort from Marcus. The revised will removes Emma Thompson Wheeler as a beneficiary, David confirmed. "Your assets will pass entirely to your wife, Linda, with provisions for your stepson, Michael, in California." Michael was Linda's son from her first marriage, a 30-year-old software engineer who had always treated Bob with respect and gratitude. They exchanged Christmas cards and occasional phone calls, maintaining a cordial relationship despite the physical distance. "Correct," Bob said. "And the trust fund we set up for Emma's education will be dissolved, with the funds transferred to the Michael Thompson Education Foundation we discussed. The foundation will provide scholarships for children from single-parent homes." Bob had decided that if Emma didn't want the education fund he'd spent years building for her, it could help other children whose parents were struggling to provide opportunities. Children who might appreciate what they were given. "What about the business?" David asked. "Miguel Santos will have the option to purchase Thompson Construction at a significant discount, with financing terms that make it manageable. He's earned it." Bob had worked with Miguel long enough to know he'd treat the employees fairly and maintain the company's reputation for quality work. It felt right to keep the business in the hands of someone who understood its value. After ending the call, Bob walked through his house, seeing it with new eyes. The family photos that had once brought him joy now felt like exhibits in a museum of his naivety. The rooms that had echoed with Emma's laughter for 2 decades now seemed hollow, waiting for their real purpose to be revealed. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Bob, I think we need to talk more. I don't want this to come between us." Bob read the message twice before deleting it without responding. Emma had made her choice with the clarity of an adult. She'd chosen biology over love, money over loyalty, and possibility over gratitude. Now she would live with that choice. Bob turned off the lights and headed upstairs where Linda was lying awake in the dark. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. "It's done." "Maybe we should have fought harder," Linda whispered. "Maybe we should have reminded her of everything you've done, everything you've been to her." Bob settled into bed beside his wife of 18 years. "You can't make someone love you, Linda, and you can't make them grateful for something they see as ordinary. What do we do now?" Bob stared at the ceiling, listening to the air conditioning cycle on and off. "Now we accept that some people enter your life temporarily, even when you thought they were permanent, and we focus on the people who choose to stay." More. In the morning, Bob would return to his construction sites. Miguel would continue being the son he'd never asked for but had somehow found, and Linda would begin the process of healing from her daughter's betrayal. Emma would start her new life as a Wheeler, with all the opportunities and complications that came with it, and Bob would finally understand the difference between being a father and being called one. November brought an unexpected cold snap to Phoenix, with temperatures dropping into the 40s and a rare frost warning that had locals scrambling for jackets they rarely needed. Bob stood in his backyard, dismantling the swing set he'd built for Emma 16 years earlier. The metal had begun to rust, and the wooden seats showed signs of weathering, but the structure was still solid, built to last, like everything Bob created. 3 months had passed since Emma's declaration of independence, and the silence from her had been absolute. No calls, no texts, no visits home. According to Linda's careful monitoring of social media, Emma was thriving at Northwestern, posting photos of her dormitory, new friends, and various campus activities. Marcus Wheeler featured prominently in many posts, visiting for Parents' Weekend and taking Emma to expensive restaurants in Chicago. Bob loaded the swing set pieces into his truck, each component representing hours of work and love. He'd spent an entire weekend that spring when Emma was 7, carefully following instructions and double-checking every bolt. She'd been so excited she'd tested the swings before he'd finished tightening the last screw. "You sure you want to get rid of that?" Linda asked from the back porch. wrapped in a heavy cardigan that made her look smaller than usual. "No point keeping it," Bob replied, securing the load with bungee cords. "Nobody's going to use it." Linda's face showed the strain of the past months. She'd lost weight and developed a nervous habit of checking her phone constantly, hoping for contact from Emma that never came. The house felt different without Emma's presence, quieter, lonelier, somehow less purposeful. "Miguel called," Linda said. "He wants to take you to lunch to discuss the business transition." Bob nodded. The paperwork for selling Thompson Construction to Miguel was nearly complete. Miguel had been overwhelmed by the generous terms, insisting he wanted to pay full market value, but Bob had been firm. The business needed someone who understood its culture and values, and Miguel had earned the right to own what he'd helped build. Bob's phone rang as he finished securing the swing set. David Chen's name appeared on the screen. "Bob, I just received some interesting information," his attorney said without preamble. "Emma Thompson Wheeler filed legal paperwork to formally change her name. It became official yesterday." Bob felt no surprise, only a dull confirmation of what he'd expected. "I see. There's more. Marcus Wheeler contacted my office this morning. Apparently Emma recently learned about the changes to your will and she's upset." How did she find out?" "I'm not certain, but I suspect she applied for financial aid at Northwestern and discovered that the trust fund had been dissolved. She's been trying to reach you, according to Mr. Wheeler." Bob glanced at his phone and saw 17 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize, along with a dozen voicemails he hadn't bothered to check. What did Wheeler want? He requested a meeting, said Emma is devastated and wants to discuss repairing the relationship. His words, not mine. Bob climbed into his truck, the worn leather seats creaking under his weight. "Schedule it for Thursday afternoon. Might as well get this over with." The meeting took place in David Chen's downtown office, a gleaming high-rise that reflected the Arizona sun like a mirror. Bob arrived early and sat in the conference room watching traffic crawl along Central Avenue below. At 62, he felt every day of his age lately. The physical demands of construction work catching up with him, the emotional toll of the past months weighing heavier than any building materials he'd ever carried. Marcus Wheeler arrived precisely on time, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. He was accompanied by Emma, who looked pale and thinner than Bob remembered. She wore designer clothes that he'd never seen before, clearly gifts from her biological father. "Bob," Marcus said, extending his hand with the same practiced confidence he'd shown months earlier. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Bob shook hands briefly, then turned to Emma. "Emma." "Hi, Bob." Her voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the confident young woman who'd dismissed him at graduation. They sat around the polished conference table, David Chen at the head, Bob on one side, Marcus and Emma on the other. The arrangement felt like a divorce proceeding, which in many ways it was. Marcus took the lead, as Bob had expected. "Bob, I think there's been a misunderstanding about Emma's feelings toward you. When she learned about the changes to your will, she was devastated. She never intended to hurt you." Bob looked directly at Emma. "Is that true?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Bob, I had no idea I thought you understood that wanting to know my biological father didn't mean I didn't care about you." "Didn't care about me," Bob repeated slowly. "Is that how you'd describe our relationship? Caring about me?" "That's not what I meant," Emma said quickly. "You know I love you." Bob leaned back in his chair. "Do I?" "Because when you spoke at graduation, you made it very clear that I wasn't your real dad. When you decided to change your name, You erased 20 years of being a Thompson. When you accepted Marcus's offer to pay for your education, you rejected the fund I'd been building for you since you were 8 years old. Emma's tears began flowing freely. I thought you'd be proud of me for being independent, for taking opportunities. Independent. Bob's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Emma, accepting money from Marcus isn't independence. It's just choosing a different dependency. Marcus leaned forward. Bob, with respect, I'm Emma's biological father. I have a responsibility to provide for her. Where was that responsibility when she had pneumonia at 6 and spent 3 days in the hospital? Bob asked. Where was it when she needed someone to teach her to drive, or help with algebra homework, or listen to her cry about her first heartbreak? Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. I know I wasn't there then. You weren't there ever, Bob continued, until it became convenient, until she was grown and accomplished and ready to make you look good. Emma stood abruptly. This isn't fair. You're acting like I committed some terrible crime by wanting to know my biological father. Bob stood as well, his height making him imposing even in the formal setting. You didn't commit a crime, Emma. You made a choice. You chose biology over relationship, money over loyalty, and potential over history. Those are adult choices, and you have every right to make them. Then why are you punishing me? Emma's voice cracked. I'm not punishing you, Bob said quietly. I'm accepting your decision and adjusting my life accordingly. You've made it clear that Marcus is your real father, so let him be your real father completely. Let him provide for your education, your future, your security. Let him be the one you call when you need advice or help or comfort. Emma looked stunned. But I want both. I want Marcus in my life, and I want you too. Bob felt something cold settle in his chest. You can't have both, Emma, Bob said, his voice carrying the weight of months of hurt. Not the way you want them. You can't call Marcus your real father, and then expect me to remain in the backup role, waiting in the wings for when it's convenient. Emma's face crumpled. That's not how I see you. Isn't it? Bob pulled out his phone and scrolled to Emma's social media profiles, which Linda had shown him the week before. Northwestern University student Emma Wheeler. Grateful for my father's support and guidance. Amazing weekend with Dad in Chicago. So lucky to have my father's business connections. He set the phone on the table. 17 posts about Marcus in 3 months. 0 mentions of the man who raised you for 20 years. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Social media doesn't represent, it represents choices, Bob interrupted. Every day, Emma makes choices about who matters to her, who she acknowledges, who she credits with her success. And every day, those choices make it clear where I stand. Emma wiped her eyes with a tissue David had quietly provided. I was just excited about getting to know Marcus. It doesn't mean I forgot about you. Forgot about me? Emma, you erased me. Thompson Construction built the college fund you rejected. Bob Thompson spent 20 years going to every school event, every soccer game, every dance recital. But Emma Wheeler doesn't seem to remember any of that. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Phoenix sprawled endlessly under the November sun, a city where people came to reinvent themselves, to start over, to become someone new. David Chen finally spoke. Perhaps we should discuss the practical matters. Emma, your stepfather's will has been legally modified. The trust fund established for your education has been dissolved, and you are no longer named as a beneficiary for any of his assets. Emma's eyes widened. All of it? All of it, Bob confirmed. The house, the business, the retirement accounts, everything. It will all go to your mother, with provisions for Michael. Michael? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. My mom's son in California? Your mother's son, who calls me Dad, Bob said simply, who sends me Father's Day cards and asks for advice about his marriage, who treats me like family even though we have no biological connection. The parallel was deliberate and devastating. Emma had been replaced by someone who understood what Bob had been trying to give her all along. Marcus cleared his throat. "Bob, I understand you're hurt, but surely we can work something out. I'm willing to discuss Emma maintaining some connection to your family." "My family?" Bob's voice turned cold. "Mr. Wheeler, Emma made her family situation very clear. You're her father now. Congratulations. That comes with all the responsibilities I used to carry." Emma was sobbing now, the sophisticated young woman dissolving into the child she'd never quite stopped being. "Bob, please. I made a mistake. I didn't understand." "You understood perfectly," Bob said, though his voice gentled slightly at her tears. "You understood that Marcus could offer you things I couldn't. Money, connections, opportunities. You made a rational decision based on what you thought would benefit you most." "But I want you in my life too." Bob sat back down, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Emma, you're asking me to remain invested in someone who uninvested in me. You want me to keep loving you like a daughter while you treat me like a family friend. You want the security of knowing I'm here while you build your real life with Marcus." Emma looked at him through her tears, and for a moment Bob saw the little girl who used to climb into his lap during thunderstorms. But that little girl was gone, replaced by a young woman who'd learned that love could be conditional, that family was negotiable, that everything had a price. "I'm 18, Emma said quietly. "I'm still learning how to navigate all of this." "You are," Bob agreed. "But you're learning as Emma Wheeler now, not Emma Thompson. And Emma Wheeler will have to figure out her relationships without the safety net I provided for Emma Thompson." Marcus leaned forward. "Bob, I think you're being unnecessarily harsh. Emma made some mistakes, but she's still young." "She's young, but she's not stupid," Bob interrupted. "She knew exactly what she was doing when she chose you. She calculated the benefits and decided I was the losing proposition. That's fine. People make those calculations all the time." Bob stood and gathered his jacket. "But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. I'm not going to smile and act grateful for whatever scraps of affection Emma feels like throwing my way between her new life adventures." Emma jumped up. "Bob, wait. What do you want me to do? How do I fix this?" Bob paused at the door, his hand on the handle. For a moment, the conference room was completely silent. "You can't fix it, Emma," he said finally. "Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. You can only learn to live with the pieces." He turned back to face her one last time. "I want you to have a good life. I want you to be happy and successful and loved. But I want you to have those things as the person you chose to become, not as the daughter I thought I had." Bob left the office without looking back, taking the elevator down 40 floors to street level. The Phoenix sun felt warm on his face as he walked to his truck, past the palm trees and desert landscaping that made the city unique. His phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Boss, the crew finished the Morrison project early. Want to grab a beer and celebrate?" Bob smiled for the first time in months. Miguel always knew when Bob needed company, though he never made a big deal about it. Some relationships, Bob reflected, didn't need constant maintenance or dramatic declarations. They just existed, steady and reliable as bedrock. "On my way," Bob texted back. As he drove through the familiar streets toward Miguel's favorite bar, Bob thought about the swing set pieces in his truck bed. Tomorrow, he'd donate them to a community center in a neighborhood where children might actually appreciate having something built with care and attention. Children who might grow up understanding the difference between being given something and earning it. Children who might know the value of love that didn't come with conditions or expiration dates. Bob Thompson had spent 20 years learning to be a father. Now, at 62, he was learning to be himself again. And discovering that sometimes the hardest lesson in love was knowing when to stop teaching it to people who didn't want to learn. Epilogue. 2 years later, Bob stood in the same conference room where he'd last seen Emma, this time signing papers that made Miguel Santos the full owner of Thompson Construction. Miguel had insisted on paying market value despite the generous terms Bob had offered, and the business was thriving under his leadership. "You sure about retirement?" Miguel asked as they shook hands. Bob smiled. "Linda and I bought that RV we've been talking about for years. Time to see the country." Through the window, he could see construction cranes dotting the Phoenix skyline, the city continuing its endless growth. Somewhere out there, Emma Wheeler was presumably building her life with Marcus's support and guidance. Bob had heard through Linda that she'd graduated Northwestern with honors and started a promising career in marketing. He was genuinely glad she was doing well. Bob's phone buzzed with a text from Michael in California. "Happy Father's Day, Dad. Sarah and I can't wait to see you and Mom next month." Some gifts, Bob had learned, came when you weren't looking for them. Some families were built by choice rather than chance. And some fathers earned their title not through biology, but through the daily decision to keep showing up year after year, until someone finally understood what they'd been offering all along. As Bob left the office building for the last time as a business owner, he felt lighter than he had in years. The sun was shining, Linda was waiting at home with travel brochures, and somewhere in California, a son who'd chosen him was planning their next visit. It turned out that being enough for the right people was infinitely better than never being enough for the wrong ones.